The RX 6600 is probably one of my favorite budget cards. It's been a godsend when it was released. However, in 2026, is it time for you to upgrade this to the latest RX 9060 XT if you want to stick with the grid theme? And in terms of upgrade, I've asked you guys before, what's an upgrade? You wanted at least 50% performance bump. So will the 9060 XT give that 50% performance bump for the RX 6600? If it does, then it's an okay. If it doubles the performance, even better. And if it's maybe like only 20%, it's probably not a good idea, right? So we're gonna test both of these cards in a lot of games and a lot of resolutions, 1080p, 1440p, and 4K, and we're going to use realistic settings. And to keep it real, we're also going to use a standard Ryzen CPU. We're trying to keep it like really grounded. So we're just going to use the Ryzen 7600 for this test. Okay, let's start off with Arc Raiders. And we've got low settings in here at 1080p. And look at that one, boys. That's an 80% performance bump. Let's go to another game. Cyberpunk 2077, ultra settings at 1080p. And look at that one, boys. There's a lot of status there with our RX 6600, which we don't get with our 9060 XT. That's, once again, a huge bump. That's actually double. Let's go to another game. Oblivion Remastered, a game that's really VRAM intensive. Look at this one, boys. That's a huge difference there. 110 FPS against, no, actually 100 FPS against about 60 FPS. 59% better performance. Let's go to our massive multiplayer shooters. Battlefield 6 here, and 58% better. That's actually quite good. Let's go to another shooting game, Delta Force, and in our walking benchmark. That's a huge difference there, boys, right? That's almost 300 against about 150. 90% better on the walking benchmark. How about on the firing benchmark? Wow, double the performance, right? How about PUBG? This one's a DX11 game, and look at that one. Only about 53% better, but that's actually pretty good. We want to see how this one performs later on when we go to higher resolutions. Let's move on to our competitive shooters. Let's start up with Fortnite performance mode. And it's actually pretty close in here. We got high GPU utilization with our RX 9060 XT compared to the RX 6600. And boom, even with that one, boys, the lows are suffering with our RX 9060 XT. There's something going on there. Okay, another competitive shooter is a Valorant. Now, in this case, we didn't really get any FPS gains, but the lows are actually pretty good with our RX 9060 XT. Okay, moving on to our hero shooters, and here we have Apex Legends Heavy Action Benchmark. Look at that one, 300 FPS, max FPS against about 180 with our RX 6600. Definitely an upgrade. And on our static benchmarks, it's the same thing, right? We're still getting at least 50% better performance on our static benchmark. Let's go to Marvel Rivals. Now, this one, wow. Look at the difference there, boys. The RX 9060 XT is definitely a good upgrade if you're coming from the RX 6600. Let's go to another game, Helldivers 2 on an hour Gatling benchmark. Wow, huge lead, 83% better. On our stratagem benchmark, it's the same thing. We're still getting about 80% better performance with our RX 9060 XT. Battle Excel 2 now, and we've got FSR in here, but we're just using native. And yes, more than double performance with our RX 9060 XT. And lastly, we have World of Tanks for our 1080p games. As I mentioned before, this game has a different architecture, so we want to mix this one into our benchmark suite, and we're getting about 64% better performance. Okay, boys, just a quick one. If you want to support us, just head down to Patreon. You'll see all the other behind-the-scenes videos and posts that I normally wouldn't post here in YouTube. All right, let's go back to the video. Let's move on to 1440p, and we've got Arc Raiders in here. We got FSR 4 on the 9060 XT and only standard FSR on the RX 6600, and we're getting at least 59% better performance with our RX 9060 XT. Yes, FSR 4 is definitely much better in terms of image quality compared to the standard FSR on our RX 6600, so you have to take that into consideration. Same thing with Cyberpunk 2077. We've got FSR 4 once again with our RX 9060 XT. This is ultra settings and low look at how much stuttering our RX 6600 is getting here. It's much worse compared to our 1080p, and that's about 80% or almost 90% better performance with our RX 9060 XT. And on Oblivion Remastered, oh, this one's just a night and day difference, right? We've got more than 70% better FPS with our RX 9060 XT. Definitely using more VRAM in here. You can see that our RX 6600 is actually tapping out at 7.8 gigabytes there, whereas on our 9060 XT, that's more than 9 gigabytes. Let's move on to our massive multiplayer shooters, and yeah, once again, we got higher FPS with our RX 9060 XT, although we are using FSR 4, which isn't the same feature when we're using with our RX 6600. And Delta Force walking benchmark, wow, right? That's almost double the performance there. Let's go to our firing benchmark, double the performance now on our firing benchmark. Okay, let's move on to PUBG DX11 Enhanced API, and we're getting pretty good FPS with our 9060 XT. RX 6600 is playable, but you know, you get a lot more with our RX 9060 XT. Back now to our competitive games, and we've got Fortnite in here, 1440p performance mode, DX12. And look at that one, boys. The RX 9060 XT is now pushing compared to our RX 6600, although we're still suffering on the 0.1% lows there, and maybe a little bit of margin of error there for our 1% lows. When we move to Valorant, you can see that it's still consistent, right? The RX 9060 XT is still getting much better lows compared to our standard RX 6600. Back now to our hero shooters, and here we have Apex Legends, and in our heavy action benchmark, boom, look at that one, right? We're still getting almost 70% better performance with our RX 9060 XT. On our static benchmark, it's the same thing, more than 70%. Marvel Rivals at 1440p, we do have upscalers in here, although we are using FSR 4 with our 9060 XT, and that's about more than 70% performance uplift with our 9060 XT. And on our Helldivers 2, that's almost double. And the Gatling benchmark, when we move to the Stratagem benchmark, it's the same thing, almost double, right? That's 150 FPS against about only 75 FPS. Battle of Excel 2 now, and we also use upscalers in here, just a standard FSR, and the RX 9060 XT is double the performance. And lastly, we have World of Tanks in here, Ultra SD settings, and yes, we're definitely getting much better FPS with our RX 9060 XT. Okay, let's move up to 4K now. And first up is Arc Raiders 4K low settings. We've got upscalers in here, but we've just set the quality settings to performance because we want to keep it realistic, right? So we're getting about 100 FPS with our RX 9060 XT at FSR 4 and only about 70 FPS on our RX 6600 with the standard FSR, and that's about like 32% lead with our RX 9060 XT. When we move to Cyberpunk 2077 Ultra settings at FSR 4 with a 9060 XT and FSR standard on the 6600 at performance settings, and you're getting 84% better, right? You're getting only about 60 FPS with a 9060 XT. It's a really bad experience here with our standard RX 6600. So obviously this is not realistic, but you can play 4K if you want to with our RX 9060 XT. Okay, PUBG now, and we've got 4K in here, competitive settings, and you can definitely do that with our RX 9060 XT. It won't be that good, but you'll still be getting about 115 FPS compared to only like really low FPS with our RX 6600. Let's try World of Tanks Ultra SD at 4K with our, oh, look at the stutters there. Like both of these cards have really stuttering, right? There's really bad stuttering with our RX 6600, and there's a little bit of stuttering with our RX 9060 XT. Not the best performance for both cards, but you know, the RX 9060 XT is still better. How about if we tone down the settings here? And when we move it down to medium settings, we have more stable performance with our 9060 XT now. We're getting about 170 FPS, whereas with the RX 6600, we're still stuttering really hard in here. And before we talk on the overall performance, we got to look at the power consumption for both cards. And here we can see that with our RX 9060 XT 16GB, we will be pushing about 170 watts in here compared to the RX 6600, which is only capped at 100 watts. So that 70 watts difference is in there. However, you will be getting a much better performance if you're upgrading from the RX 6600 going into the RX 9060 XT. If you want to stay in the red theme in 1080p, you're gonna get about 68% better average FPS jumping from the RX 6600. In terms of the 1% lows, you'll be getting about 58% better performance, and on the 0.1% lows, it's about 41% better performance. The only outlier in this test is Fortnite. When we did that performance mode testings, wherein the RX 9060 XT is just worse in that case, right? Especially on the lows. However, the biggest uplifts in this test is Cyberpunk 2077 and Path of Exile 2, which is like at least double the performance, right? When we go to 1440p, jumping from the RX 6600 going into the RX 9060 XT, in terms of average FPS, we're gonna gain about 72% performance. In terms of 1% lows, that's about 64%, and on the 0.1% lows, that's about 53% better performance. Now it's starting to pull ahead. Now Fortnite is still a bit of a drag here for our RX 9060 XT. Yes, it's a little bit better in terms of the average FPS, but the lows are not as good. When we go to 4K, in terms of the average FPS, the RX 9060 XT will be 72% better compared to the RX 6600, and the 1% lows, it's 82% better, and the 0.1% lows, that's about 61% better. So very consistent across the board. It's just better, right? Definitely an upgrade if you're considering on all these resolutions, 1080p, 1440p, or 4K. I would suggest that it's an upgrade, apart from if you're only playing Fortnite. When we look at pricing, currently the RX 9060 XT 16GB is very expensive due to our AI boom. It's about $450, which is really expensive, right? So if you're planning to sell your RX 6600 and upgrade to an RX 9060 XT, the RX 6600 used is about like $200 in eBay or $190 in eBay. If you sell that, you're still gonna cough up a lot of money jumping into the RX 9060 XT. What I would probably suggest is you might have to hold on to your RX 6600 and maybe upgrade later on, because right now it's a very expensive. And speaking of budget cards, if you're coming from the green theme, we recently did a test with our GTX 1660 Super, and see if you jump over to like the newer RTX 5060, is that worth it? And it was quite interesting. So if you want to see that, click this video right here, like that one. I'll see you boys over there.